you have direct effects on learning capability. I saw recently a study where boys had been subjected to a linguistic language test, and when they were exposed in the double-blind fashion to mobile phones, they did less well. So actually the microwaves as such makes you dumber.
Okay.
Yeah. Cancer is an issue, that's for sure, but the real big issue is allergy, asthma, and other oversensitivities. When I was a kid, it was extremely rare to find a child with any form of allergy. Today, more than 50% of children in Sweden up to the age of 14 are allergic asthmatic. And when you allow the key cell for asthma and allergy, the so-called mast cell in your body, to be exposed for levels of microwaves from mobile phones that you are supposed to withstand, they react as if they would have met pollen, nickel, or some other allergen. Oh yes, it has been published in many times. And also there is a Japanese scientist who has shown that you have an eczema, and you're exposed to eczema from mobile telephones, it gets worse. Okay. Yes. So you see, there are so many pieces in this jigsaw puzzle. I know, but and the funny thing is that, or maybe not even funny, the scary fact is that it is in the public domain. Anyone can download this information, and after this video, they will of course know.
When the mobile phone is in standby, it's not as would we say it's not as dangerous as when it is being used?
Well, you don't know that because in standby, the most modern telephones will just send single signals. If it's really standby, it's not moving around. You don't have it in your car or anything like that, but it's just lying on the table, for instance. And if we sort of just make an image and say that each time it sends a signal, you get bitten by a poisonous snake, will you die the first time or the 1000th time? Well, you will die the first time. So the impact on the biological system could be very bad already at the beginning. And there are studies, for instance, on the blood-brain barrier leakage, where the rats were exposed for 1 minute. Not 1 year or anything like that, 1 minute. And at a very low exposure level compared to what you and I should stand. And they got this dramatic leakage of the blood-brain barrier. So it seems that 1 bite could be enough, you know. Yes. Okay. And I think there's a misconception that always more is worst. For some effects, like the DNA fragmentization, then you have a cumulative effect, meaning the more you're exposed, the worse it gets. The fragmentization of the DNA molecules, that's a genotoxic effect. If mobile phones, e-readers and Wi-Fi and so on, if there would be a food item or a pharmaceutical drug showing such genotoxic effects, it will immediately be prohibited and forbidden. Course, yeah. Immediately. Because mankind has agreed upon genotoxic effects never. But mobile phones have that. And this year, something very peculiar has happened, and which actually stressed me a lot. You know, now we talk about one scientific field, namely health effects of electromagnetic fields. There are other scientists in completely other fields who don't know a thing about this at all, and they are not even interested. And one such field is the repairment of DNA molecules after damage. How could we do that? And such scientists, they then damage DNA and then repair it using various molecules, such as melatonin, for instance. But first they must damage their test DNA molecules, and generally they use some harsh chemical, but it's really a very harsh treatment. It's not so delicate. And therefore they have looked for years for sort of a non-invasive surgical knife that could non-invasively destroy DNA. And they looked around in society and they found an item that is ideal, namely mobile phones. So they have this year published a paper which is about repairment of DNA using melatonin, and then you start to read and, aha, they damaged the DNA using a mobile phone, a genotoxic effect, which society says, no, it doesn't exist. And in the laboratories around the world, it's used as a surgical knife nowadays, you know.
Okay, so it's being used for that.
Yeah, and that is dramatic, and I understand the insurance companies that they don't want to touch this at all, you know.
These genotoxical effects,
yeah.
How can they be translated into normal disease, so that people could understand what we are saying?
Of course. You know, if you have genotoxic effects, alterations at the DNA level, that could lead to, for instance, that vital cells in the immune system suddenly doesn't work, and suddenly sort of a normal disease like a flu could suddenly be very, very deleterious and be very hazardous to mankind. And it could ruin the whole immune system, and not only in us, but in animals and plants, bacteria and so on, you know. And somewhere it could be a dramatic effect. And right now, for instance, people are very afraid of the reduction in insects worldwide, especially the pollinating insects. And they don't know why it's like that. It could be a virus, bacteria, parasite, and so on. But maybe it could be electromagnetic fields from mobile telephony.
Yeah, and that is a threat to all the flora, right?
Exactly, yeah. And in Sweden, there was recently a debate, and someone said then, if there would be such an impact on pollination, meaning that we don't have more food, we will still have food for several years. And then there was another expert, no, not several years, we have for several months in Sweden. But then the third expert said, no, you don't even have for a week before it will be riots in the street and people killing each other over food. So the preparedness of society is not very strong, you know. So
we don't even know what the effects will be.
No, exactly. So, but also when we go back to genotoxic effects, that could be the start of cancer, for instance.
Okay.
It could, yeah, and the most serious effect is, of course, damage to sperm cells and egg cells, and then there will not be any tomorrow, you know. So.
Because there's been an increase on infertility.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And they still don't know exactly the reason.
Exactly, and what they see is that they have, in Europe, for instance, a dramatic reduction in sperm quality in men, and they don't know why. And then they have done experimental work using a mobile phone as an exposure, and then the sperm cell quality went down. Motility, morphology, viability, etc. So sperm cells should not buy and own mobile phones or e-readers or Wi-Fi and so on.
Okay.
But they're exposed. While we talk, everyone on the street, they are exposed. And the coffee shop says, free Wi-Fi. They could just as well maybe say, we will kill your sperm cells for free. You know, nowadays, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of publications, and if anyone would like to sort of just feel their way through some of them, they could look, for instance, at a report called the Bioinitiative Report, which is a very short summary of approximately 4,000 publications, all pointing to that this is not a good thing to expose people to.
Can you repeat the name, please?
The Bioinitiative Report.
Okay.
And it's found on the internet, so you can Google it. And 4,000 publications, and I don't quite remember now the number of pages. I think the report is in the order of 1,400 pages or something like that. So it takes a while to read it, but just by holding it in your hand, you realize that, wow, authorities says there is no data, there is no research, and suddenly you hold kilograms of paper in your hand, you know, it's heavy. And it's just the tip of an iceberg. If you want to dig deeper, there is more and more and more. And while we are talking, I'm sure that new papers are published. And for instance, when I go away somewhere in the world and I'm away for a day, just a day, when I get back, Often there is 1 or 2 or 3 papers more, you know. It's very quick development in knowledge. And as I say, unfortunately, it points in the very same direction.
Okay.
And you know, don't be fooled about the fact that you will find a lot of publications that doesn't show any effect. You cannot use them as weights. You cannot balance these. And just to make an easy image, if we fill this room with harmless snakes, but we put 1 poisonous cobra in here, I promise you, you will not stay here.
No.
1 report is enough to change the behavior of mankind, you know.